Russia's information warfare is growing and is effective. However, I am currently in the backwaters of what would be a prime target for Russian disinformation, and I don't necessarily feel that Westerners understand Russian disinformation as much as they think they do. And while I do think that obviously the bots down in the comments will be going on about how I know nothing about Russia, I know nothing about Romania, I know nothing about any of the countries I've been to. As I said, I'm here in Craiova, I'm in Romania. I know, at least on a base level, what people think here, what people feel here, if not just because what they tell me. And something about Russian disinformation that is very common is that Russians don't exactly lie. They bend the truth, and they insert it in a way that would make objective truths inherently impossible to believe. The largest threat to Russia is objective truth, and the largest threat to the West is also objective truth. And so, while I understand that there is benefits to actually this information warfare being created, especially from a standpoint of the inherent lack of solid information that is coming out, I think this realistically is why I started my channel, because I don't really like Russian disinformation, nor American disinformation, nor EU disinformation. Of course, they will still exist, and there will be a time when, of course, I am pressured more as my channel grows, and of course, I will continue to fight against what is pushing objective truths into the ground, and what is inherently creating a gap between what is the actuality of what is happening on the ground and the headlines. Of course, in Craiova, there is a lot of people who are pro-conservatism. Not necessarily pro-Russia, but pro-conservatism. And this does not bode well with people who are in the EU, as conservatism is considered to be bad. It is considered to be a line to fascism, which, of course, will create resentment, especially in religious conservative areas like Craiova. And while these religious battles are happening, that's where Russian disinformation shows itself. And this also is something they've learned from Soviet times. The US has always been good at soft power. They have never been good at information warfare. And so it's with this that information warfare in the United States is severely underdeveloped, and I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. I don't think that the United States should be going through and creating disinformation. Of course, this is what the Russians tend towards, and while obviously there is a lot more of the disinformation here in Craiova or in Yash or anywhere that people are fairly religious, I do believe that these people understand, to some extent, the objective truths, and so it's less problematic than you would think. Of course, as time goes on, I think that will lead to fracturing and bloc dynamism, where blocs are trying to essentially insulate themselves. We have already seen this in the United States, where the US is trying to insulate itself from the outside world, which, if you look at how the US works and the US federal government works, it's very similar to the EU, just with an added federal body, which is, of course, something that is different to the EU. However, the way that states work versus the federal government is largely similar to what it is in the EU. And so the US is undeniably a block of states. Now, The EU obviously is starting to insulate itself as well. Recently, there have been a lot of pushes to corner China, for instance, in the overall global marketplace, and especially towards cars and electric vehicles, as China is trying to gain dominance in that area. But, of course, none of this really is truly that detrimental. And I think that, honestly, Russia creating disinformation creates a unity in a way that we haven't seen in a long time. And I hope as Romania develops, already it is a very developed country in comparison to what it was in the 1990s. Certainly since then, however, even since 2007, it has massively become a outlier in growth stories and overall growth. But as this disinformation campaign happens, I think that realistically it's creating a alternative to the West that isn't necessarily Russia, it isn't necessarily the US, it isn't necessarily China, it's neutrality. And as the more ridiculous the disinformation becomes, the more able Romanians are to become neutral. The more able Poland is able to become neutral. The more able Bulgaria is to become neutral. And so, of course, I think that this is actually, and this isn't a popular opinion, this is actually creating a third path or a fourth path, depending on who you ask, and it creates a very different view of what the United States and what Romania are going through as this disinformation campaign continues. Now, of course, this has been more of a politically charged video. I tried to stay neutral in the way I presented it, so if you appreciate the way I presented it, feel free to leave a like. If you really liked the video, feel free to give it a share. If you are looking to join me on this journey of international business and international structuring, feel free to subscribe. If you're looking for one-on-one consulting, absolutely free for 15 minutes, feel free to click the Calendly link down in the description below. This has been the Traveling Report, signing off.